I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a number of issues relating to the state of Israel. The Knesset's recent adoption of a law banning entry into Israel of those who actively support the BDS movement, seen by many as an attack not only on Israel's legitimacy, but on its existential existence. Then there are questions about Donald Trump's relationship to Israel in the aftermath of his telling Israel not to build any new settlements, something that came as a surprise to many who thought the new president would green light anything Prime Minister Netanyahu wanted to do. And then there's the issue of the Orthodox Chief Rabbinate, which seems to have torpedoed a compromise agreement for non-Orthodox expressions of Judaism at the southern end of the Western Wall, and which seems to be increasingly encroaching on Israeli life in general. Well, for some Israeli perspective, I'm so pleased to be joined by one of the most eloquent and incisive voices on the world Jewish scene, the man who may well be Jewry's foremost columnist today, whose column appears weekly in the Jerusalem Post, Israel Hayom, and online, Isi Leibler. And Isi, it's so wonderful to have you with us again.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Isi, you are a deeply committed, observant Orthodox Jew. In that context, you recently wrote a scathing piece on the Orthodox Chief Rabbinate in Israel. I want our audience to see the opening lines from your piece. You wrote, "It's ironic that with Jewish observance and spiritual values at unprecedentedly high levels in Israeli society, the established religious leadership has sunk to its lowest nadir. There are many wise, creative, and worldly Israeli rabbis, but in most cases they are marginalized or even dismissed as being reform. Compared to their predecessors," and you're referring to former Chief Rabbis Isaac Herzog and Shlomo Goren, "the current Chief Rabbis are mediocrities." You then, as you go on to castigate both current Chief Rabbis, Ashkenazi and Sephardic, as being puppets of the ultra-Orthodox Haredi, whom you say have no real appreciation of the state of Israel or any interest in harmonizing Judaism and Israeli life with modernity, and that their only real concern, you contend, is with maintaining power. And then you point out that due to Israel's political system, which you call dysfunctional, secular Israelis are powerless. My question is to what extent do average Israelis in Tel Aviv, in Nahariya, Haifa, Beersheba, to what extent do average Israelis share your perspective?
I think if you take a poll, 80% of Israelis would say they're outraged by what's taking place. Furthermore, they don't feel that they have a means of expressing themselves because the political parties, whoever they vote for, are all involved in the game of trying to stay in government and trying to negotiate for government, and they allow this group to extort them because they occupy that central position. And it's tragic because I think that Haredim can play a very important constructive role in this country. And I don't believe that Haredim are bad. I believe that the people who are leading them, the rabbis, are bigoted, that they are narrow-minded, and they should not be the ones who are looking after the interest of Judaism in Israel. There are marvelous rabbis out there, and those rabbis are not given the opportunity of acting and are pushed aside. I use the word marginalized, and I think that's a good word. They're trying desperately to fight against it, but it's not good. And I must say, it's not only the Haredim. Within the religious Zionist framework, there are also extremists, as you have seen from that guy in the yeshiva that came out with these extraordinary remarks about women in the army. So, look, the remarkable thing is that Israel is a country which today has greater depth of spirituality and religious observance and interest in religion than ever before in its history. But unfortunately, that is not matched by the political establishment, which is controlled by the extremist Haredi element. And it's very sad for us. We will overcome it. The economics will overcome it because these people are encouraging youngsters not to work and to learn all the time, as if that's the Jewish objective. The greatest sages in our time were all people who worked and took pride in making a livelihood. These people are simply acting as wards of the state. They're receiving social services, and as they're growing demographically, it's just impossible. It will resolve itself one way or another. The longer it takes, the tougher it is for the rest of us. But if you ask me, overwhelmingly, it would be an absolute desperation to change the important role of religion as it stands now in Israel.
Isi, in America, American Jews sort of crystallize the issue you've described over the issue revolving around rejection of Jewish pluralism in the state of Israel, where marriages and conversions of Reform and conservative rabbis are not accepted, and where Israel defines the Western Wall as an ultra-Orthodox synagogue. Those are the issues which galvanize American Jewry. Are these the issues which energize Israeli concern?
Look, Israelis are concerned about it, and there's a growing problem arising because there are 300,000 or more Jews who are not converted and who are not halakhically considered Jewish, and there will be further problems with their marriage. There's a whole need for a change in the framework. We should have a rabbinate which is encouraging conversion, which is making it more palatable and easy, and trying to bring the halakha, which served the Jews for 2,000 years in diaspora, to bring it in the context of a modern industrial state and bring it into line. And we had rabbis who used to do that. We had, as I said, Rabbi Herzog. We had Rabbi Nissim. We had great rabbis on both sides of the spectrum. But today, they are really people who are not worldly, who don't understand the concept of Torah and Derech, and it's very, very sad. And I believe it will change, but it's going to take time.
Okay.
There is an overwhelming feeling that change is imminent, and I believe that after the next elections, there's every possibility that they'll be kept out of the government. I know that there are a number of groups that would like to do that. It depends on the political constellation.
Okay. I want to push you one more moment. Again, from the Israeli perspective, I want to know if Jewish pluralism is the issue as it is for American Jewry. Do Israelis care about whether women can pray at the Western Wall? Do Israelis care whether Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis can marry in Israel or whether their conversions are accepted? Or are there, you talked about the economy. Are there other issues? I'm wondering how the Haredi control of certain aspects of Israeli life actually penetrates the day-to-day existence of Israelis walking on the streets, in various streets outside of Jerusalem, all over the country, on a day-to-day basis. Where does the Haredi Orthodox control and influence, because of their role in the Knesset and in the coalition government, where does it impact the Israeli life?
Is when someone wants to get married, the bureaucracy that they have to go through with this rabbinate is unspeakable. And you have modern Orthodox rabbis who are trying desperately, and have actually set up a Beit Din of their own to handle it, to make it possible, because lots of Israelis who are not religious just gave up and decided they wouldn't have a proper halachic wedding, and they went overseas to have their wedding because of the problems that the rabbinate was putting towards them. And the extreme manner in which they were investigating them, and the lack of warmth and feeling and passion that one should have had towards people who are getting married. So that causes a lot. As far as Reform and conservative, I think most Israelis don't care, couldn't care less. As far as they're concerned, even those that don't go to a synagogue, they think of an Orthodox synagogue if they go to a synagogue. They don't think of a Reform or a Conservative. I must say, however, that the Conservatives have made a great headway and are doing good things, particularly in the school system. Their Tully school system is providing Jews who are not Orthodox and not necessarily observant with Jewish tradition, Jewish history, and a Jewish understanding and Jewish values, which is unfortunately lacking in the secular school stream.
Yes.
Although Bennett is trying to reintroduce that, and he's facing all sorts of opposition.
It's a fascinating story in and of itself. Isi, what about the flap over women in the IDF and whether women can sing at IDF ceremonies? What's been the average Israeli reaction to all that?
Very negative towards that, and very lack of understanding. I mean, the obsession with gender on the part of the ultra-Orthodox, even within the religious Zionist framework, on the extreme, is something which is puzzling and frustrating. And the statements that came out by this rabbi from the yeshiva were quite outrageous. I mean, suggesting that anybody who goes in the army, any woman who goes in the army doesn't come out Jewish. I mean, he was come down upon like a ton of bricks, and he'll have to back down or get out. And I believe that's right, and most people would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Look, you just said to me, 80%, you feel 80% of the Israeli people are just fed up with the way the system works. Everybody understands it's a function of coalition governments and small splinter Orthodox parties having a disproportionate power because they are needed, their few seats are needed to push a coalition over the 60
Absolutely.
number. Okay. If 80% of the Israeli people are fed up with this, why isn't there a groundswell, an enormous groundswell in Israel among the Israeli citizenship to change the Israeli citizenship, the Israeli political process from a parliamentary system to a system similar to the United States?
Because of the sense of frustration in trying to do so, because the people in parliament that have to bring these changes about are going to commit an end to their own political careers and political interests. That's the problem. The lack of interest in the national interest, the egomania of most parliamentarians, of thinking of themselves rather than of the nation. But that's the main reason. I think that one of the reasons why Lapid did so well in the elections was because he said he was going to do something about keeping Haredim out of the government. In the last government, they were out. And there was an effort to slowly change things. I believe that may happen again.
All right.
I don't believe this is I believe that this is a very powerful irritant, but we'll overcome it. And I must say, don't misunderstand me. The average Haredi is a very important component of Israel and a constructive part of Israel. Don't look at those hooligans that go on the streets and throw stones as the average Haredi.
Yes.
The average Haredi can teach Israelis, can teach us all, particularly the hedonists in our midst, can teach us all quite a bit.
I understand. All right, on a related issue, Isi, Rick Jacobs, who heads the reform movement in America, the URJ, he recently questioned the nature of Israeli democracy in light of the Knesset's passing a bill that would keep active supporters of the BDS movement out of Israel. First of all, what's your reaction to the Knesset's passing that bill? Did it upset you? Were you in favor of it? And then how do you think most Israelis feel about the bill?
Look, there are two aspects to this. The first aspect, as far as the bill itself is concerned, I opposed it for one reason. I opposed it because I don't think it was necessary. But if you ask me, I believe that anybody that is promoting BDS should not be permitted to come into this country. I've never heard of a country which enables people that are preaching its destruction to come and visit it. And the United States certainly has a record, as does Britain and other countries. So Israel is right in keeping them out. I don't think they have to go through that legislation because it created a furor over nothing. They had the ability to stop these people coming in. But these people coming in, it is a disgrace that they were coming in, And I believe the government is perfectly entitled to say, enough is enough. If you are calling for the destruction of Israel, you're not going to do it from our shores and use us as a platform.
Okay.
So that I agree. Now, you asked me about Jacobs.
Yes.
Let me say, and here I have to go a little bit broader, I hope you let me. I believe that Rick Jacobs, Rabbi Jacobs, has done an enormous disservice to the Jewish community of America. I believe that his whole approach has been one where he's entitled to be as liberal and as negative towards the new administration as anybody else. But he has used a religious vehicle in order to promote his own political agenda. He has used Judaism as a vehicle against Trump. He has accused him of anti-Semitism. He has gone at a time when we are going through very delicate negotiations. He has gone to Abbas, who is not exactly a fine person, with a group of people, and told them how he agrees with them in opposing settlements, which he's entitled to. He has to go to Abbas and tell him that. I believe it's a disgrace. I believe he reflects something which is happening to American Jewry, which is going to have enormous negative repercussions, because what is happening is we're losing bipartisanship, and we are becoming, seen as, when mainstream Jewish leaders use their organizations to promote a political agenda, then it is a terrible situation. And you have to remember, 50% of the people voted for Trump, like it or not. 50% of those people, a large proportion of those, are Christian evangelicals, the core of support for Israel. In many respects, far more important to us, unfortunately, than many of these reform people that have been rubbishing Israel. Now, for these people to see their leader being called an anti-Semite by rabbis in the name of Judaism, that's what he's entitled to all his free opinion. Anybody's entitled to an opinion. But to use Judaism in this, it's going to cause a long-term problem for American Jewry. It's going to minimize their political influence in the long term. And Jacobs, I believe, together with a few other mainstream people, in particular the ADL, I think they've done the Jewish community a terrible injury. The screeching about anti-Semitism. I wrote well before we discovered anything that it's very easy for anybody to call and make calls on anti-Semitism. Little did I know there was a Jew that was doing it, and an African American. But the suggestion that there was a wave of anti-Semitism all brought about by Trump, particularly in a situation where it's so delicate. And if you watched AIPAC the last few days, Israel is desperately looking to find a modus vivendi, and they will, I hope, which can make the world of difference. This Trump, first time, we're at the United Nations, someone's got up and said what had to be said. He stood up and did the right thing with the finances when he cut back on everywhere else. And look, he's unpredictable. And I'm not going into his other domestic issues because I don't have to get into American domestic issues. But as far as Israel is concerned, I pray that he'll be successful. I pray that we can find an accommodation. And believe me, we do not need to take over settlements everywhere over in Israel. I want us to build up in those areas where we're going to keep long term. And believe me, the vast majority of Israelis would settle on that. And the extreme radical right in Israel, Bayit Yehudi and some of the right-wingers in Likud are wrong to push the settlement everywhere because they're not going to achieve anything. They may end up rubbing our noses against the American administration and creating problems. And we don't want to have a bi-national state. We are never going to have a situation where we're going to annex 2.5 million Arabs. We have to find a separation. Maybe not a state at the moment, and maybe never, but certainly not what is being suggested by those that want to annex straight away and to do it in the face of America. Trump has to be given the opportunity of trying to make peace if he wants to. He's just a great deal maker. I think he's going to come a cropper on this. He'll discover that the Arabs you can't, with the Palestinians you can't make peace. They're endemically unable to do so, and if they did so, their leaders would be assassinated because the hatred against Israel and the culture of death which they generate is so intense that it's impossible. But let him have a try, and we have to go along and give him every opportunity and be constructive.
That's a very, very balanced approach, Izzy, and I appreciate, as you always do, you're trying to show us it's not about a middle path. It's about having certain convictions and finding a way to both hold one's convictions and deal with the reality that is confronting both the state of Israel and the Jewish people as a whole. I did want to ask you questions about Trump, but I want to hold off for one moment. I want to come back to the other issue of the nature of democracy in Israel. Rabbi Rick Jacob's argument is that the bill that the Knesset passed is really a bill against free speech. There are people in Israel, Israelis, who, for whatever reason, they believe in BDS. They are boycotting goods and activities on the West Bank. And so there are those in America who say, why would the Knesset pass a bill against people who want to come in who are, yes, active BDS members, when there already are, when that is a position held within Israel, and that it's a matter of free speech, and that the Knesset is limiting free speech, and it's in that sense that Rick Jacobs was critical of the Knesset bill. How would you answer the charge that Israel is moving towards a less democratic, more, in some way, state that is going to limit issues like freedom of press and freedom of speech?
I think we have the freest press in the world. Our press is crazy. Some of our press, sometimes I feel, should be being paid by the other side, the rubbish they bring out with. So there's complete, unlimited freedom of expression in this country. Sometimes it reaches excesses and damages us. But as far as this BDS is concerned, it's one thing for a handful of Israelis citizens to argue that they are against the country. They can do that. They're Israeli citizens. But that doesn't give a green light for us to bring in people who are coming in for the prime purpose of agitating in Israel and creating more tension in Israel and using Israel as a platform in which to harm us overseas. It's got nothing to do with free speech, and he knows it. And free speech is a word you can bandy around as much as you like. But Israel, nobody can detract from the fact that we are one of the freest countries in the world. Never mind the region. The region is a nightmare. But I'm talking, they're as free as any country in the world. Freer than most countries.
Absolutely.
No apologies for people who want to come here from overseas and don't live here to use us as a platform on which to undermine us. That's not free speech. That's a country doing what England does. Why don't they criticize England for limiting free speech? They don't let everybody come into the country. They deny many people coming in the country. Extreme right-wingers, extreme left-wingers. They deny them. Nobody says that's denial of freedom of speech and the parliamentary system is going to break down. Jacobs should watch his mouth when he uses expressions like democracy about Israel.
Okay.
We have nothing to be ashamed of.
Okay. I tend to gravitate to your position. I also think it's amazing how American Jews just don't understand that Israel still is in a state of war. And certain things have to be modified when a nation is at war, and America has done it all the time. I do have one last question for you about Donald Trump. You spoke passionately about how you're against any attempt to basically annex the entire West Bank. You seem to be against new settlement building outside of the settlement blocks now.
Yes.
But there are people who are saying there was a celebration in Israel when Donald Trump was elected because they thought Donald Trump was going to simply, again, be a yes person for Netanyahu. And he was going to move the embassy. Well, he didn't move the embassy. And he was going to, in contrast to President Obama, he was going to leave settlements alone. Well, he's not leaving settlements alone. I want to know at the moment whether how you feel the Israeli in the street views Donald Trump as being the new leader of the free world. Are Israelis concerned? Do Israelis now worry about Donald Trump? Or is there an embrace of the Trump presidency?
There's an unpredictability amongst us all. We can't predict. We feel that he has a certain chemistry which can explode, and we don't know which way it can go. But by and large, I believe, as far as the Jews are concerned, he has done everything right. He has not turned against us. On the contrary, he stood by most of the things he said he would. He made general statements about settlements, and believe me, most of us don't want to have a situation where we're going to be opening up settlements all over the place. I mean, there's only a small percentage of Israelis that want this. The majority of us want to separate from the Palestinians and build up in those settlement blocks and areas that we're going to retain. So we look at Trump with hope. We look at Trump as providing us with the opportunity for the first time, perhaps ever, to have a genuine alliance with America. I believe there's that chance. And whether or not he moves the embassy now or later or not at all, that's not the key to it all. I mean, I believe there's still a chance he may still move it. But there are many factors involved there. We are involved in a very delicate, covert relationship with many Arab states. We have to balance that. I'm saying we, not only Trump. He has to balance it. We have to balance it with a number of moves that we might make straight away. We have to be very cautious and step by step. And we're in the best position if we can reach an accommodation of minds with the administration. We have the best opportunity. And for goodness sake, what a disgrace. An administration which is full of pro-Israeli people, huge numbers of pro-Israeli people, which has got Jews in leading positions. What a disgrace to try to turn them into anti-Semites for political reasons. I find that despicable. And I believe those American Jews engaged in this should be ashamed of themselves, and they should be told off by American Jews.
Isi Leibler, I love you so much, you know that. I also find you to be the most courageous columnist in the Jewish world today. Continue your fabulous work. We'll continue to read you and highlight you. And whenever we can, we'll turn to you for insight and wisdom. And of course, when you ever come to the United States, you always need to sit with me in studio. But my best to you, kol tuva hatzlacha, and all you do. Good health to you, to Naomi, your whole family, and we will speak again very soon.
Thank you, Mark, and a Chag Sameach, joyous Festival of Freedom for all of us, and to all your viewers.
Thank you so much. Zis and Pesach. Thank you, Isi. The thoughts of Isi Leibler, whose weekly columns appear in the Jerusalem Post and in Israel Hayom, and you can receive Isi's columns online by signing up at wordfromjerusalem.com or simply Google Isi Leibler's name. My thanks as always to our director Sloan Copeland, production coordinator Serge Goldberg, JBS's associate director Dara Golub, editors Dennis Golan and John McDevitt, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.